All right, well, Stella and Mrs. Callhammer here going to teach you about chapter 9.1. These are your learning targets, so please make sure you read over those so you know exactly what you need to know for this chapter. So, cells, what you see in the bottom here, we've already talked about the parts of the cell and how cells get things in and out. Now we're going to talk about cell reproduction. So first let's talk about how cells have limits. A term you need to know is called surface area. This is the area covered by the outside of the cell, the plasma membrane. And volume right here is the space taken up in the inner contents of the cell. Cells with a higher, get out of here, Pinterest. With a higher surface area to volume ratio can sustain themselves more easily. So higher is the word. So here's a small cell, here's a large cell. The ratio of surface area to volume. So here are two surface area to volume ratios for that small cell, and then here's that large cell. The small cells with a higher surface area to volume ratio can transport substances more easily. They can diffuse ions in more quickly. They can communicate more effectively and efficiently. Just think about it. If the directions to make a protein are located within the nucleus, it can get it out in a faster time than in this cell than if it had to travel all the way through this cell. Okay, and to calculate surface area, you take length times width. So in this cell, it'd be 2 times 2, because it's a cube, times the number of sides. So 4 times 6, it would be 24. Oops. 24. And then volume is length times width times height. So 2 times 2, 4. 4 times 2, 8. Okay. So the larger surface area to volume ratio, this one, is more efficient at getting things in and out of the cell. The cell cycle is the process in which one cell becomes two cells. And cells need to do this in living things because it reaches a certain limit. And so that cell needs to either divide or stop growing. And each time one cell divides into two is an entire cycle. The three main stages are interphase, mitosis, and cytokinesis. First, interphase. This is when the cell grows and replicates its DNA. The second main stage is called mitosis. This is when the nucleus and the nuclear material within the nucleus, the DNA, divides. Not divides. Oh yes, divides. It's late. Mrs. Callhammer's forgetting words. Divides is the word. And there's 4 substages. And lastly, cytokinesis. This is when the cytoplasm specifically divides, eventually creating the end product, the 2 new, and write down daughter cells. Daughter. So I added in some numbers here, you'll see. Okay, so this is asexual cell reproduction, which we're talking about in this chapter, in which one parent cell, so write down parent cell, divides to become 2 daughter cells. And these daughter cells are identical to the parent cell. The reason why you see 46 is in here because that represents the number of chromosomes in the human cells, for example. So my skin cells all have 46 chromosomes. 46 in the parent, 46 in the daughter cells that are genetically identical to the parent. Humans actually, and other living organisms, have 2 general types of reproduction. Asexual and sexual. A, remember, the prefix means without. So asexual is when cells replicate to produce cells that are identical to themselves. In humans specifically, we have certain cells that replicate all the time to replace cells that have been worn out. A few examples. 1, skin cells. You shed cells and those cells need to be replaced. by asexual reproduction. Also, blood cells. Your red blood cells actually only live for about 120 days and then they're recycled. So new red blood cells need to be made. Another name for these cells, or they're referred to as non-sex cells or somatic cells in the body that undergo asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, and we'll talk more about when we get to genetics, is when one cell combines with another cell to form a genetically different cell. A genetically different cell. Example, sex cells are referred to as gametes. Gametes can either be sperm with 23 chromosomes or egg with 23 chromosomes. The reason why they have a special name, gametes, sex cells, is because unlike every other cell in the body that has 46 chromosomes, these cells only have 23. The reason why, 23 plus 23 equals zygote equals 46, which is the first cell that you and I both were in development. Now here, you're going to want to maybe pause and grab two colored pencils. I use red and blue, okay? So this entire pie or timeline represents the cell cycle. Starting here, this is the starting point where one cell will rotate through these steps to eventually become two cells, okay? This is the cycle. So a cell first begins the cell cycle in G1 of interphase, then it goes into S of interphase, and G2 of interphase. Notice that interphase takes a really long time in the cell cycle. The next stage is the M phase, and this is mitosis and cytokinesis. So I'm going to even add the word mitosis over here. Mitosis and cytokinesis. Okay, it's really small. Mitosis and cytokinesis. And I put some abbreviations here, which you can add, which we'll talk about later, but this stands for prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and then this is the cytokinesis. These first four are mitosis. So interphase broken down. During G1, the cell is growing, getting bigger in size and doing its thing. And the S phase, S actually stands for synthesis, so the cell is copying its DNA in preparation for cell division. And I added a picture here of different genetic material. So the genetic material within the cell can exist in different forms, look differently. It's all the genetic material, however. So on the left here, this is the most relaxed form of DNA. It's referred to as chromatin. And the progression here is to the most condensed form of the genetic material known as the chromosomes. And the chromosomes and the chromatin are both going to be referred to in cell division. In between the two, to get to this condensed form, the chromatin actually has to be wrapped around these proteins called histones in this arrangement called nucleosomes. So we have G1 getting bigger, S replicating DNA in the organelles, and G2, what's happening is the cell's just waiting, preparing for mitosis. Mitosis, we can see right here, it's the cell's nuclear material dividing within the nucleus and separating. Cytokinesis is specifically the division of the cell itself, the pinching off of the cells, and the division of the cytoplasm. Division of the cytoplasm. Eukaryotic cells divide via or by the cell cycle. Eukaryotic cells, so plant and animal cells. Bacteria or other prokaryotes, and I realize you might need to darken this in, reproduce asexually by something called binary fission. Binary fission. Prokaryotes reproduce asexually this way. They do not go through the cell cycle. What happens, I added words in here, this green oval represents one prokaryotic bacteria cell, like E. coli or something. And how it replicates, and this is time, is, and I also have an arrow pointing to the DNA. The DNA in prokaryotes is circular shaped. Okay, so what happens is essentially that circle will replicate and peel off and release two genetically identical DNA parts, and the cell will eventually pinch off from each other very quickly, and that's binary fission. And that's the end of 9.1.